All right, today we're going to start with GMAW or gas metal arc welding. Our first weld we're going to do is a surface weld. We have a lot of different random metal. I want you to cut something about 4 inches by 4 inches or maybe 3 by 6, depending on the metal you find in the yard. Here in front of me I've got a piece of 4 by 4, approximately 1/4 inch thick. And I'm going to just start by laying beads just like we've done before. Now with gas metal arc welding, we can drag it and we can push it. It really doesn't matter either way. The bead shape will change. If I drag it, I'll end up with more of a mounded up weld. And if I push it, I'll end with a more flat crowned weld. So that preference is up to you. The more crown you have on a weld, the less likely it is to be structurally sound. So we want to try and keep our welds as flat as possible, so keep that in mind. Our stick out length should be about a 1/2 inch or so. We don't want to get too long of a stick out. And if we get too short, if we're too close, then we can wind up ruining our nozzle and start dragging all sorts of stuff through there. I'm going to start by doing one drag weld and then by doing one push weld, just so you can see the difference. All right, so there you can see that was a push and that was a drag. Now we're going to go ahead and do some more overlapping beads. All right, now keep in mind, again, you want to try and overlap. Put the wire right on the edge of that previous bead and run a nice and smooth one. We're going to do this 8 times again. Now, if when you start the bead, it starts to pop and sputter, it could be that your table's really dirty and there's not a very good electrical circuit. If the electricity is trying to find a consistent path through the weld, through the table, through the cable, and back around, and there is a little bit of rust or some BBs or spatter that it's sitting on and it's not getting a good electrical path, it'll pop, 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 all right? So you might need to clean your table down. Again, that's really important why we're grinding our tables every day to keep them nice and flat. Again, we're going to try and overlap each previous bead a little bit by our next bead. And there's no slag, so we don't need to chip anything. We can just keep going. And I would quench your weld probably every 3 or so welds. It is a good idea after your weld, there's a little BB on the end of your wire, and sometimes that can cause the electrical sputter. So it's a good habit to have to clip the end of that wire after every weld. Your settings for this assignment will depend on the material thickness you found to cut up. If it's 3/16, go straight for the 3/16 settings. If it's 1/4 inch thick, go for the 1/4 inch thick settings on the chart. I've got 5 welds here, so I gotta do 3 more. Okay, you can see how I'm body positioned right here, and that is so while I'm pushing it, I can actually have a clear vantage point of the wire melting into the puddle and creating the bead as I push the weld towards my face. You want to make sure you can actually see that wire melting into the puddle. If you are behind the gun and you only see a bright light, you need to reposition your body and your head so you can see the weld puddle. All right, after you're done with your 8 welds, make sure it's quenched and you can go ahead and bring it up to me and we'll take a look at it. All right, so there's our surface weld, nothing to really write home about. Just a nice, good, consistent bead. You'll notice that there's some of these little islands right here, right there. They look kind of brown, sometimes they look gray. That's actually glass or silica. That's part of what's in the wire to scavenge out all the rust, you know, the mill scale that's flaking off right here. It's basically being consumed by that silica, gathering it up and floating it to the surface. So there is a little bit of what you might consider slag on your weld, but it doesn't need to be chipped off. You can weld right next to it or right on top of it. All right, so in finishing, you just need to remember that this is going to get pretty warm as you do multiple passes. And again, the hotter it gets, the more flat the weld will get. It'll sit lower to the surface. So sometimes you might want to go 3 or 4 welds before you quench it. But it all depends on the settings you pick for your voltage and your wire feed on this weld. All right, good luck.